Hey, what's going on? This is the second part of my Crydamoure review slash retrospective. If you haven't seen the first part, please watch that before watching this one. I'll put a card up there if you're on desktop. Otherwise, I'll leave a link to the video in the description. Also, before I get into things, I want to correct a small mistake I made in the first video. When talking about the track Wrath of Zeus, I said that it featured a series of string and guitar samples. I don't know what the hell I was talking about. There's no guitars in Wrath of Zeus. What I was actually referring to were the electric piano samples from that Lips Inc. song, so yeah, I figured I'd correct that. Anyway, last time I capped things off by talking about Sedat's The Turkish Avenger, so naturally, the next release to cover is...
Oh hey, it's Le Nightclub again. I feel like it's been a little while. I'd say this single is the most chill of them all. Although the two tracks here are definitely still up-tempo, the mood is generally more relaxed and breezy compared to many of the other Crydamoure tracks. Gator especially stands out as an outlier. It's a very minimalistic cut made up of just a light swinging drum machine beat and the Earth, Wind, and Fire sample. The way the sample was manipulated is a bit odd because the bass is mixed way louder than everything else. The guitar ended up getting buried, but in spite of that, it still strangely works well. By the way, there's a weird moment a little after the 3-minute mark where there's an extra snare for some reason. I'm guessing this was done by accident, but I don't know for sure. It's something interesting to note though. Gator is basic in its construction, but the actual sound of it is nice. Unlike some of the other Le Nightclub tracks, the simplistic arrangement and repetition don't bother me here, nor does it overstay its welcome. Though I will say that the other track, Chérie d'Amour, is the stronger offering. The filtered loops of guitars and electric pianos sound gorgeous, as does the subtle synth pad in the back. Again, there's not much to this track, but the actual content is very pretty. The drums and percussion are also at the perfect level of intensity, being notable but not overbearing. I remember one time when I was 15, I listened to this track while at a beach on vacation. I was climbing the rocks during sunset, and the track fit the scene perfectly. This memory, alongside the serene vibe of the piece, makes Chérie d'Amour one of my favorite Le Nightclub tracks. Here we have the first of 3 Crydamoure singles from Archigram. Archigram was a Parisian duo consisting of Julien Malart and Nicolas Trichet. I apologize if I butchered either of those names. Blending together electric guitars and bass playing with synthesizers and drum machines, their style was a mix of rock and house elements. As such, they brought a unique flavor to Crydamoure that no other artist could have contributed. I always felt these guys never really got the praise they deserved. Not to imply that they're hated, but their tracks aren't nearly as popular as, say, Le Nightclub's or the Buffalo Bunches. It's too bad because the few tracks they did release on the label are all great. Let's dive into their first release, starting out with Mad Joe. This is a dark, mischievous track that combines a driving bass line and psychedelic guitars with an infectious synth melody and a spooky looped sample from Grand Jojo's Patrouille de Nuit. I like how the piece fluctuates in energy level and the atmosphere is unique compared to other Crydamoure tracks. It manages to be both danceable, yet spooky and somewhat mysterious. This appears to be the duo's best known piece, and it's not hard to see why. Fantastic track for sure. The other cut here, In Flight, goes for a more low-key and relaxed mood. The same melody from Mad Joe also appears here, but it's delivered through electric guitars instead of synths. I like how they flipped the composition into a new context. There's some nice wave sound effects that pop up occasionally, as well as a little synth riff and some phaser-covered loops. Once more, the bass work here is on point, and the Sugar Pie Guy sample running underneath much of the track gives the piece an extra layer of depth. I do like Mad Joe more, but In Flight is still a strong track in its own right. The guitars are the main star of it, as they shimmer through the mix and make the piece more striking than it would have been otherwise. There's also an alternate version of In Flight included on the single called the Raw Club Mix. It keeps the same bass line and guitar recordings, but features a whole different set of synth sounds. The beat was replaced with a stronger one, and the Sugar Pie Guy sample was given far more emphasis. It was mixed pretty quietly in the original, but here it's placed front and center. They also threw in a couple of other samples from Sugar Pie Guy to keep things fresh. I think both versions of the track have equal merit. The original carries more of a chill atmosphere, where the Rock Club mix is more groove-centric. The bell samples included in the latter are a great addition, by the way. Waves is a compilation of selected tracks on the label, presented in a continuous mix done by Le Nightclub. While they probably aren't the first ones to it, the idea behind this comp is genius, and I've even seen the concept reused with another French house label, Vulture Music. As stated before, this was my introduction to the music of Crydamoure. If you've never heard anything on the label, I'd highly recommend making this your starting point. The mix itself is very well done, with smooth transitions between most of the tracks. As the name suggests, there's sound effects of waves rolling and crashing peppered throughout the comp. This helps tie things together in addition to the DJ mix itself. They also fit perfectly with the tracks that already have a tropical vibe, like Boogie Shell and Chérie d'Amour. Some of the tracks were pitched and sped up slightly, but this doesn't affect the quality of them. The one exception to this is Coral Twist, which was pitched and sped up way too much. The original version is definitely more enjoyable. On the flip side, a few of the tracks are actually more enjoyable in the context of this compilation. For instance, Boogie Shell is better here because it doesn't stretch on as long, and Coco Girls is better here for the same reason. That one also sounds nicer with the slight pitch up, and I like the record warp transition. The selection of tracks here is quite good, although Wet Indies did not have to be here. The fact that it has the longest runtime of all the songs here is frankly insulting. I remember when I first listened to Waves as a kid, it felt like Wet Indies went on forever, and I couldn't wait for it to end. The good news is that you can skip over or completely remove it from the track listing, and it won't screw up the flow of the mix. Wanna know how I know that? Regardless of my issues with it, Waves is a compilation I've listened to countless times, and I remember being blown away by some of these tracks on first listen. If you enjoy the material here but haven't heard the full versions, I'd recommend seeking some of them out. Some of the tracks only last like 2 minutes here, while the originals go on for 5 or more minutes. Curiously, there's actually 2 different versions of Waves. The first version, from 2001, has a tropical climate as the cover, while the second version from 2002 has the Crydamoure stone over a red background. Outside of aesthetics, the only difference between the two is that the second version has the Raw Club mix of In Flight between White Winds and Boogie Shell. The second version is easier to find online, but the version I own is the first one. This is the version I'm used to listening to and like more, since it gives White Winds more room to breathe. Though I will say the Raw Club mix sounds badass in a different key. It doesn't really matter which version you go with, though. The second to last Le Nightclub record is when the duo went all out with the tropical theme. All 3 of these tracks sound like they could easily soundtrack a warm summer day by the beach. I'd argue that the first cut here, Soul Bells, is in many ways the quintessential Le Nightclub track. The Bit Crush samples from the Brothers Johnson make for great hooks. They're memorable and welcoming. The track can get somewhat repetitive at times, but the loops here never become grating, and there's still enough variation to keep things interesting. Some of the variations are more subtle, like the EQing and the brief little stutter edits, but others are more obvious. For instance, there's a breakdown around the 2-minute mark featuring a loop that doesn't get used anywhere else. This part is very much appreciated, as is the inclusion of that occasional psh sound effect. I also feel like 5 minutes is the perfect length for this track. It lasts long enough for me to sink myself into, but it ends before it can become stale. This is another one of my favorite Le Nightclub tracks. As a side note, the horn recording in the first loop sounds like it's saying, Alright, I could keep going, but I still have 2 more tracks to discuss. The aptly named Palm Beat has its own set of bit-crushed funk samples, but these are more guitar-centric. This one has more original production elements than Soul Bell, featuring guitar recordings of their own, and a little doo-doo passage. These are nice additions, as are the filtered breakdown sections. The sampling is very well done once again, and the stomping drum machines complement the music perfectly. Palm Beat also has a nice progression to it, and I love how energetic it is. Enjoyment-wise, it's right up there with Soul Bells, but there's a little more going on in this track. Both are shining examples of what makes French house so fun. That leaves us with Tropicall, which slows things down a tad and feels a bit more easygoing and airy in terms of the sonic palette. It's a solid track, but not as good as the preceding ones. There's only one hook here, unfortunately, and it's noticeably more repetitive than the other 2 cuts. So, yeah, Soul Bells and Palm Beat are both great. Tropicall is not as memorable or striking, but it's still a good track. The final Le Nightclub single continues the tropical sound and presentation that became the duo's signature style, especially at this late point in the label's life. The pair of tracks here are both pretty and sunny offerings. Nymphae song makes a few different bit-crushed hooks out of one lengthy Rhythm Heritage sample, and that's basically it. I mean, the groove here is good, but it's not as appealing as other Le Nightclub tracks in my opinion. It's a basic track without much to it, but it's still enjoyable. By the way, if you're wondering what Nymphae means, there you go. Anyway, I'm definitely more of a fan of the other cut, Rhumba. This one goes for something similar to Palm Beat with its funky guitar-driven loops and snippets of original instrumentation. The hooks here are better than Nymphae song, and there's more going on as well. For instance, the zipping synth noises in some of the drops and breakdowns are a nice touch. I wouldn't rank either cut here among my favorites on the label, but both of them are very solid, especially Rhumba. I should mention that even though a good number of Le Nightclub tracks are straightforward and repetitive, I still enjoy pretty much all of them to various extents. Some of them don't give me much to discuss though, which is why a handful of these Le Nightclub segments have been short. Now this is a great freaking track. Sadly, it's one that tends to get overlooked. Carnaval is a peppy and jovial tune with lots of blaring trumpet licks, a myriad of synth textures, and an absolutely addicting bass line. That bass line in particular has randomly popped in my head, and each time that happens, I catch myself humming it out loud. It's that damn good. There's also some guitars thrown in to add a little extra punch, and everything is held together by a nice pattering beat. True to the title, it evokes imagery of a theme park. I can picture all the rides swinging through the air while everyone is having a good time. Excellent track from start to finish. The BBR aka Bring Back the Rave mix is a somewhat calmer and more stripped back take on the original. It's got some of the same elements but features some new guitar licks, a light skittering synth pattern, and a few very sparse breakdowns. The fun and dynamic bass line of the original was replaced with a much simpler sub-bass. It's an interesting remix, and I like how it differs mood-wise, but it doesn't hold a candle to the original. That version is more striking and fun to listen to, but the BBR mix is still decent, and nice to have as an extra bit of content. If I'm being honest though, it is the Crydamoure track I've listened to the least often. Part of that is because I much prefer the original, but it's also because the track doesn't appear anywhere other than this vinyl release. I feel like as a result, this is probably the Crydamoure track that's hardest to find online in good quality, so that's another factor. Before I move on, I feel it's worth mentioning that this single is one of only 2 Crydamoure releases to not feature any known samples from other artists' work. The other one is Cryda was the name given to a various artist collective that was only used for this one release. The 3 tracks here were produced by different groups of people, with Eric Chedeville, aka Rico, being the sole consistent member of said groups. I really like how varied this EP is, and I think it comes together as a whole very well. The first cut, If You Give Me the Love I Want, is easily the most commercial and pop-friendly track on all of Crydamoure. It got released as a single in its own right a year after this EP dropped, further exemplifying the pop appeal they were going for. This song sees Eric Chedeville working with 2 vocalists and a few other people behind the scenes. Most of them don't have much or any other musical credits to their name. When I was younger, I mostly felt ambivalent about this song. I didn't hate it, but if I wasn't in the right mood, I couldn't get into it. Nowadays, I think it's quite solid for what it is. I don't love the vocals, but they're not bad either. The falsetto singing matches the instrumental well, and both the singers deliver good hooks. The instrumental is definitely stronger though. You get a nice mix of funk guitars, electric piano chords, playful percussion, and a watery Giorgio Moroder-esque synth bass. It does a good job blending together funk and disco elements. The more mechanical sounding filtered drum machine pattern towards the end is also a nice switch up. So yeah, I can't say I love this track, but I do think it's very good. It's a lot better than younger me gave it credit for. The following track, Playground, I can confidently say I love. This one is a contribution from Le Nightclub in collaboration with Meredith Nebinger. Nebinger is a Swiss producer who founded the Pump King Records label alongside Chedeville. Anyway, Playground is the easy highlight of the EP. It's such a bright and colorful tune with a ton of texture. The various sections each have enough room to breathe, while also gelling together perfectly. There's a bunch of horn sections, 2 stomping bass lines, an airy wordless vocal loop, and some filtered guitar fiddling in the back half. That's just some of what this track has to offer. Also, like with Wetness Anthem, there exists an unreleased version with added vocals. Now, unlike Wetness Anthem, which would have benefited from the added vocals, Playground works well without them, and I'm actually glad they were excised. They're not bad at all, I just think the track works better as an instrumental, and it has enough going on already. But yeah, Playground is phenomenal. It manages to be a banger, but isn't in your face about it. No doubt in the top 10 best Crydamoure tracks for me. That leaves us with Loaded, which was done by Playpal and Chedeville. This one takes a turn for something more electro house adjacent. It starts off quiet, then more elements get added, and by the 2-minute mark, it turns into a thumping banger. It's got a bunch of buzzing synth textures, a bouncy beat, and mumbling vocal interjections. In that way, it's kind of like Wet Indies and GMF, but this track is way better than both of those. Playpal's vocal snippets, while ridiculous, manage to come off as earnest and somewhat endearing, instead of annoying and distracting. As goofy as it is, "We will get loaded" does make for an effective hook. This, alongside the other vocals, and that sample of fake laughing, strangely matches the raw and gritty instrumental very well. The loop of electric piano noodling in the last third is also a nice addition that again works strangely well. Overall, Loaded is a fun track with strong production and a good sense of pacing. When I was younger, I thought this cut was just good and nothing more. Similarly to If You Give Me the Love I Want, I also couldn't get into it if I wasn't in the right mood, but now I think it's great. It feels unique from the other tracks on the label. Something to note about this EP, and this applies to a few of these later Crydamoure releases, is how expensive it is. If you want a physical copy of it, you're gonna have to shell out over $100. As I mentioned in part 1, all of the releases on Crydamoure are out of print, but some are easier to find and cheaper to purchase than others. Doggystyle is another one of the more underrated entries in the Crydamoure catalog. True to Archigram's signature style, this track combines electronic textures with rock elements. Their execution of that idea is different here than in their past work though. All of the electronic instruments were studio contributions from the duo, while the vocals and main guitar loop were sampled from I Wanna Be Your Dog by the Stooges. The buzzing synth textures and distorted guitars mesh together well, and the vocals give this piece an extra playful layer that it wouldn't have had otherwise. When I was a kid, this track reminded me of Bowser's Castle from the Super Mario games. The composition and sound of the instruments made me feel this way. The first half specifically is somewhat dark and a tad menacing, but still upbeat and energetic. The second half takes out the Stooge samples and focuses more on the shuffling synth-based melody with occasional filters. There's a few subtle synth pads thrown in this section, and there's a moment towards the end where the main synth line turns all 8-bit Nintendo-esque, which is funny considering the comparison I just made. If I do have one complaint about this record, it's that there's no B-side. It's a single-sided record with no companion piece, or remix, or anything. The Carnaval single at least has a remix to go along with the original, but for this single, it's just the one track and that's it. This is a minor complaint, sure, but since no other Crydamoure single does this, I feel it's worth bringing up. All in all, Doggystyle is yet another great track from Archigram. It's got a good amount of progression, and the ideas presented here are compelling. It's too bad this was their last track on the label, but it's not their last contribution to the label. That honor goes to... Waves 2, the second continuous mix of selected tracks on the label, serves as the final release on all of Crydamoure. It makes for an effective swan song. Most people seem to view this successor as the weaker of the two Waves comps, and while I do agree with this in some areas, Waves 2 is still great. Archigram handled the mixing this time around, and they didn't do as good a job as Le Nightclub. On average, the transitions aren't quite as smooth, but don't get me wrong, I still think they did a good job. A few of the transitions are absolutely perfect, like the transition between Rhumba to Nymphae song, plus Nymphae song to Playground. There are two things that they completely botched though. First, there's a weird brief pause in Playground that's not present in the original 12-inch version. Second, they slightly mistimed the start of Doggystyle. I'm aware both of these complaints are just minor nitpicks, but they are distracting enough for me to want to bring up. Anyway, the track selection is technically better than the first comp, since I don't feel the need to skip anything here. Waves 1, meanwhile, has the one dud I consistently skip over.
No thank you.
By the same token, Waves 1 has a larger quantity and variety of tracks. The cuts on Waves 2 are longer than its predecessor as a result, but I don't mind this. Some of them are pitch shifted slightly once again, but like last time, it doesn't affect their enjoyability. A few are more enjoyable here than on their original 12-inch releases, such as Nymphae Song, Mosquito, and Wetness Anthem. Wetness Anthem actually has a little synth melody added to the end of it, which is very nice. It's also worth mentioning that Archigram added an interlude between Carnaval and Soul Bells, serving as an exclusive for this comp. Moments like these add a lot to Waves 2, and they prevent me from saying that the project is an all-around step down from Waves 1, despite the inferior mixing. Of course, field recordings of Waves are present once again, but they also put in a few other atmospheric sounds. There's a weird recording at the start of Rhumba with some heavily EQ'd guitars and a group of people speaking. "If that's my mother, tell her I'm not home, alright?" A recording at the end of Palm Beat that sounds like some sort of festival, and stormy sound effects bookending Doggystyle. So yeah, Waves 2 is definitely worth hearing. Enjoyment-wise, it's on par with the first comp. Again, if you're new to Crydamoure, listen to Waves 1 and then this sequel. Both Waves compilations are exclusive to the CD format, unless you count the rare Thailand cassette version of each. This makes sense, considering most of the singles are vinyl only. Physical copies of Waves 2 are definitely harder to come across than Waves 1. I was able to get my hands on the first one easily, but the second one took longer to find at a decent price. I eventually found a copy on Amazon for under $25, so of course I bought it and I've held onto it since. Though, this was over a decade ago. These days, you're not going to find either comp for nearly that cheap. As previously mentioned, Waves 2 ended up being the last release on Crydamoure. It's unknown why the label went defunct after this. Some of the musicians who contributed to the label continued to make music and released it elsewhere, while others released little to nothing after Crydamoure. Eric and Guy-Manuel would go on to produce Sébastien Tellier's album, Sexuality, in the late 2000s. Guy-Manuel also continued with Daft Punk alongside Thomas Bangalter until they split in 2021. Incidentally, Bangalter's label, Roulé, had its final release and went defunct the same year as Crydamoure. Maybe I'll make a video going through the Roulé catalog in 2026, but I digress. Even though Crydamoure came to an end, Le Nightclub saw a resurgence in the 2010s, as 3 new tracks were published online by Eric. On April 20th, 2015, a track called Think Love, Not Hate was posted to Eric Chedeville and his partner Melanie's shared SoundCloud account. In the description, Eric writes that it's a previously unreleased Le Nightclub track from 1999. Done in collaboration with DJ Sneak, the song features a tropical-sounding beat coupled with Sneak's vocal preaching on top. The lyrics about unity and taking action are admittedly generic and incredibly cheesy at points. The delay filter applied on them periodically is also very cheesy. The vocals aren't great, but they're not terrible and they don't ruin the song for me. On some listens they are a bit incessant, but for the most part I don't mind them too much. This also isn't a genre that requires a ton of effort in the lyrical department, so I can give them a pass. On the other hand, the instrumental is much stronger. The saxophones and Rhodes electric pianos both sound gorgeous. The funk guitars and bass also match the beat nicely. Overall, this is a good track. I'm not sure why it was shelved until this point. I think it would have fit pretty well on the Crydamoure EP. Definitely worth hearing if you haven't already. A little over a month later, on May 28th, 2015, another Le Nightclub track was posted to the same SoundCloud page called The Fight. It was created as a soundtrack piece for the 2014 film Les Portes du Soleil Alegre pour Toujours, aka Gates of the Sun. It's a big departure in sound from the rest of Le Nightclub's catalog. Instead of being like a 6-minute house track with filtered samples and 909 beats, The Fight is a 2-minute instrumental hip-hop track entirely made up of synths and a little drum machine pattern in one part. I don't mind the change in style at all. The synth textures sound very cool, and even if the track is brief, I enjoy what it has to offer. The extra synth melody during the beat-driven section especially stands out as memorable. I've seen some people complain that The Fight is dull, and while there isn't a lot to it, I still like the track. A piece like this coming out of Le Nightclub would ordinarily be out of left field, but with the context that it's meant to soundtrack a scene in a movie, it makes a lot more sense. It's also been noted that Guy-Man has become more interested in hip-hop in recent years. As a quick little side note, I actually used this track as the background music for an old channel trailer I made in 2017. On October 8th, 2015, Eric posted a video to his YouTube channel showcasing another unreleased Le Nightclub track. This one is called Sequence Emotion, and from what I can gather, it was created sometime in 1997. I actually talked about this in a video called 7 Lost/Unreleased Pieces of Electronic Music in 2019. If you want more details, give that video a watch. Unfortunately, the full version of Sequence Emotion still has yet to be released. Judging from the snippet that's available, it's a more percussive and less melodic offering from the duo.
C'est qui hein? Nightclub? Ah ouais? Unreleased? D'accord.
It does sound cool though, so I'm hoping one day he uploads the full thing. After 2015, Eric and Guy-Man went on to work with The Weeknd and Charlotte Gainsbourg for their songs I Feel It Coming and Rest, respectively. Crydamoure may have shut down over 2 decades ago, but the tracks on the label still hold up today. Between how much I enjoyed the Crydamoure tracks as a kid, how I still enjoy them as an adult, how I can always go back to them, and how the label played a part in forming my online identity and my YouTube audience, Crydamoure will always have a special place in my heart. Thank you, Eric and Guy-Man, for creating the label, and thank you to all the artists who released music on it. Oh, and thank you, the viewer, for watching this till the end. I appreciate it a lot. As a little bonus, I want to show you all something. This is an excerpt from a now private channel update video I made in August 2014. This was back when my subscriber count was under 70. Yep, there it is. Going off this screenshot, I started work on the original sampling of Crydamoure all the way back in the summer of 2014. I must have taken a lengthy break from it because that video didn't come out until November 2015. But yeah, I wanted to include that here because I found it interesting. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next time.
Make love, not war. Yo, make love, not war.
Gotta flex my sweater real quick.